Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here. Welcome back to the channel. This past weekend saw the annual Trek to Las Vegas convention take place, and we got a lot of very interesting news and tidbits from a number of the attendees. So without further ado, let's jump into the week's news.
I promised the Federation News Service a first-hand account of the battle.
You'll get it.
Ever since the end of Star Trek Enterprise in 2005, many Trek fans have clamored for a continuation of some kind. Plans were revealed for what would happen on the show had the series been picked up for a fifth season, but alas, it wasn't meant to be. However, thanks to the efforts of Scott Bakula, who played Captain Jonathan Archer, and Enterprise producer Mike Sussman, there is a possibility we may see further adventures set in the 22nd century after the end of Enterprise. TrekMovie.com recently spoke with Sussman about his pitch for a new series starring Bakula as Archer, which began life as an email exchange between the two of them regarding the idea of a Star Trek Archer television show. Thanks to an on-screen graphic that Sussman created for the Enterprise episode In a Mirror Darkly Part 2, we know that Archer eventually becomes president of the Federation after retiring from Starfleet as an admiral. The idea that Mike Sussman came up with morphed into a show that centers around Jonathan Archer as president of the newly formed United Federation of Planets. According to Sussman, the touchstones for this series include shows such as The West Wing, The Diplomat, and Homeland. The working title for the series concept is Star Trek United. Mike Sussman, with Bakula's approval, took the series concept to Alex Kurtzman's production company, Secret Hideout. There was interest expressed in the idea, and they did bring it to Paramount execs. But ultimately, after a couple of months of consideration, Paramount executives decided not to move forward. This, of course, was during Paramount's shying away from spending money on streaming, which likely spelled doom for the series at the time. However, according to Sussman, the time might now be right for another look at Star Trek United. With the recent purchase of Paramount by Skydance, there has been noise made about more investment in streaming by the company. According to Sussman, quote, "The hope is that Paramount is planning to invest more in Star Trek on television, and they've been very clear about how they want to make Paramount Plus a real player in the streaming space." Scott Bakula himself, who appeared at the Las Vegas Star Trek convention this past weekend, had this to say when asked about the series proposal. "There's nothing I am going to say about United at this point. There's a great writer, Mike Sussman, and I have had conversations about the possibility. I'm just going to say, and we will close on that, you never know." This idea for Star Trek United ticks off a number of my personal Trek boxes: the return of Enterprise in some form, the return of Scott Bakula to the franchise, and a show about Star Trek politics a la The West Wing is something that I personally have always wanted to see. The closest we've gotten is the excellent novel Articles of the Federation by Keith R.A. DeCandido, and I would absolutely love to see something like this in live-action Trek. There are certainly no guarantees, and quite frankly, this seems like the longest of long shots, but we here at Kertrats Productions are going to keep a close eye on any future developments in this story. As mentioned in the previous story, Paramount was recently purchased by Skydance, whose CEO, David Ellison, was credited as an executive producer for the films Star Trek Into Darkness and Star Trek Beyond. At STLV this past weekend, one of the guests was Simon Pegg, Scotty from the Kelvin Timeline films. When he was asked about the possibility of a future film follow-up to Star Trek Beyond, on which Pegg served as co-writer, he had this to say. "Well, I know David Ellison is a big Star Trek fan. I know he cares about the series, so I would love it. I would be delighted if we could make another film. I love those guys. And despite how we had a tragedy in our group, the death of Anton Yelchin in 2016, which was extremely painful, it would be wonderful to come together again. J.J. Abrams has always said that there are scripts being developed and this and that. I think it's about time. It would be great to see us 10 years after the 5-year mission, where we are." Pegg feels the time is right for a new Trek film. There have, of course, been a lot of Trek film announcements over the past few years, but precious little movement on any of them. Hopefully, with the purchase of Paramount by Skydance now a done deal, we might see a little more development in the film arena. Of course, we here at Kertrats have been hesitant to report on film news lately, as it never seems to pan out, so we will certainly not be holding our breaths. But the hope is still there that something may develop soon. Stay tuned. More Trek updates come courtesy of another guest at STLV this past weekend. Tonnie Newsome played Beckett Mariner in all 5 seasons of Star Trek Lower Decks, and now lends her voice to the writer's room of the upcoming Starfleet Academy. However, at last year's San Diego Comic-Con, she revealed that she was also working on developing a Trek live-action comedy series with writing partner Justin Simien. At the Vegas convention, Newsome gave the current status of the series pitch to the assembled audience. You know, Hollywood's in a place, and we're waiting to hear. We wrote the thing, and we're waiting to hear. It went so well working with Justin. It is going so well working with him. We love working together. We have writing sessions where it's mostly a lot of karaoke out at my house in the mountains, with writing in between. It's kind of like, okay, what's going to be the future? I think everyone in the business is sort of waiting to see if anyone ever sells a show again, not to be bleak, but nothing's guaranteed. What we know about this series so far is that it would be a half-hour workplace comedy set in the post-Star Trek Picard era of the early 25th century. According to Newsome, in an earlier interview with Trek Movie, she herself would also star in the series, and that the show is about, quote, Federation outsiders and what's kind of the nitty-gritty involved with joining the Federation. The post-Picard setting would also allow legacy actors to show up from time to time without having to be de-aged. Not to sound like a broken record, but this is yet another project whose future rests in the hands of the newly merged Paramount Skydance Corporation, and the optimism for it may have ticked up a couple of notches now that the deal is complete. I'm excited for the prospect of this series, and I'm a huge fan of Tonnie Newsome. I'm definitely all in on this series idea, and I'll bring you any new information as it presents itself. And finally, Star Trek Picard Season 3 showrunner Terry Matalas was also at STLV, where he was asked about, of course, Star Trek Legacy, his proposed follow-up to the end of Star Trek Picard. At his panel, he revealed that he has written 30 pages of the script for the pilot episode, covering the first 20 minutes of the episode. While Matalas was reluctant to talk about the overall concept of the series, he did reveal that the bit he wrote had something to do with the Klingon Empire. Also revealed were his plans for the return of fan-favorite character Liam Shaw, played by Todd Stashwick. According to Matalas, quote, I will say, since we're so far away from the possibility of legacy, that he wasn't going to come back to life with Borg nanites. He was going to be the emergency engineering hologram who did not want to turn off and was really pissed off that the Titan was turned into the Enterprise, and would refuse to call it the Enterprise until much later. As with the previous stories this week, the purchase of Paramount by Skydance may have changed things somewhat when it comes to the possibility of a Star Trek Legacy series. However, according to Matalas, there haven't been any active discussions about the proposed series recently, but he is open himself to the possibility. It remains to be seen if there is interest from the corporate side, but fan enthusiasm for the project remains high, at least according to the buzz that I've read on the internet. Let's hope that this possibly translates into renewed interest by Paramount Skydance, as I'd love to see the continuing voyages of the Enterprise under Captain 7 of 9, and maybe one day we'll finally find out what her go-to-warp catchphrase is. I'll include a link in the video description to Letters for Legacy, a fan-run letter-writing campaign organized to help make the support for Star Trek Legacy apparent to the producers of Star Trek. If you're interested in taking part, they have an online guide to help you draft a letter to Skydance CEO David Ellison to encourage them to greenlight Legacy.
Sometimes I think you North Americans read nothing but comic books and those ridiculous science fiction novels.
We have one new comic release this week, issue number 10 of the Star Trek Lower Decks ongoing series. Here's the synopsis from IDW. Devana Tendi has only just begun to dig herself out of the mountain of student loan debt she owes Ferengi swindlers, and already she's feeling burnt out. Despite Freeman brokering her a deal, and the help of fellow lower deckers, the Ferengi's demands are becoming more intense and overwhelming by the day. So Tendi decides to put her Starfleet education to use, and work smarter, not harder. Lower Decks number 10 is written by Tim Sheridan with art by Vernon Smith and goes on sale today, Wednesday, August 13th. Also out this week is, of course, another new episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. This week, James T. Kirk encounters an emergency situation aboard the USS Farragut, testing his command abilities and putting him through a trial by fire. The episode, titled The Sehlat Who Ate Its Tail, is written by David Reed and Bill Wolkoff and directed by Valerie Weiss. It drops on Paramount Plus on Thursday, August 14th. We will, of course, have coverage of the episode on this week's Positively Trek podcast, as well as on the Unready Room this Saturday, in which Brandy Bakula and I host a live review and discussion each week of new Star Trek episodes. We'd love for you to join us. And that's it for this week's dispatches from the Star Trek News Desk. Thank you so very much to the Patreon supporters, and thank you to all of you for watching. Be sure to hit like if you enjoyed this video, and share it with anyone you know who might appreciate regular Star Trek news updates. I've been Dan Gunther, and I'll see you again in a future video. Until then, look after each other, look after yourselves, and most importantly, live long and prosper.